So, if we want to get started, would you mind introducing yourself? Just saying your name, your grade, and your pronouns.
Hi, I'm Yusuf Amanullah. I am an MEA senior. This is my fifth year at MEA, and my pronouns are he, him.
Fifth year. So, did you transfer in eighth grade then?
Yeah, so actually, what happened was in eighth grade, I was kind of in a dual enrollment program going to MEA and another school. I just went to MEA kind of to get a head start with some of high school classes that I were not offered at my middle school, and starting from ninth grade, I'm going to MEA full time.
That's cool. Yeah. So, what made you want to come here? Did you hear about MEA before doing the dual enrollment, or was that kind of the first time you heard about it?
So the first time I actually have heard of MEA is my sister actually used to go here when she was in high school, and she started going here in ninth grade, and I was in fifth grade at that time. So that's the first time I kind of got to know what MEA was about, even though I didn't attend at that time. And really, part of the reason why I went was because there's a few reasons that I had to go, but mainly because so for the first 8-9 years of my elementary and middle school education, I went to a religious private school, and that was kind of like small. You could say I don't really say insulated environment, but kind of like a really small environment compared to what you'd expect of a normal public school. So going into high school, really me and my parents were like, okay, we want to find an environment that similar to how in elementary school I was in a small environment, so kind of like a more environment that would be able to accommodate for both my commitments outside of class and also just find a more classroom where I get more attention compared to how I would get in a public school, like more attention from teachers and that. That's really that sense. But yeah, that really helped. It worked out. I think I really have a lot of good memories of my time from MEA over the 5 years. Yeah, pretty much that's how it turned out.
I know MEA is just such a welcoming and wonderful place for pretty much everyone, and it's so accommodating to all the reasons that anyone would want to come to MEA. So,
Yeah.
do you have any fun memories from some of your years at MEA that you want to talk about a little bit?
So yeah, probably the most best memory I had from 4 years at MEA were the times I participated in academic league, including the practices and the matches. That's the one thing that I'd say it's the constant. So because the way MEA, there's a lot of people who kind of join and leave the school because it's kind of that's the way the school's set up. There's not gonna be a lot of continuity in some places. Like the one thing that was continuity and I did in all 4 years of my high school was academic league, and that's kind of I'd say the biggest high school club in the school, just because there's a lot of interest that it draws because there's people who want to participate in this form as inter-school competition. We don't have any sports like other schools. So this is kind of our sport, as you'd say, even though it's not actual athletics program. But yeah, that's the way I got to make friends with people, and that's how kind of from there I started to get more comfortable being friends with people outside of the club and into the class. I'd say that's probably the best memory to have at MEA.
That's really lovely. Yeah, we joke, ASB jokes sometimes about if we were going to plan a homecoming, it would have to be surrounding the academic league. Like, yeah, after an academic league tournament, that would be our homecoming. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that you could go to a normal public high school? Do you think that you would enjoy it?
That's an interesting question. From my middle school graduating class in eighth grade, I think the majority of them they ended up going to a public high school. I had one friend who went to a charter school, so I'm kind of the only one who went to the MEA type school. And MEA is unique anyway. It's really a school like it in all of San Diego. It's the system of having being a public school that's centered around a independent studies. So I think I probably could acclimate to a public school environment, but just the flexibility that MEA gives me, I probably missed that out on a lot. So I actually didn't mention this in your earlier question relating to what was one of the reasons I came to MEA, but kind of giving a background. In starting from my elementary school years, I was doing a religious studies program where I would start memorizing from the Quran, and that's the Holy Book of Islam. So what I basically the way the program works that you have to dedicate a certain number of hours every week to reciting passages from the book and memorizing the book, and like kind of it takes a long process of many years just so you can go through each chapter of the book and each part until you memorize the whole book. And that's the kind of a process that really not a lot of people can do because of the time commitment, and especially a lot of people who go to a regular public school, they don't have the time commitment for that just because of how much time it takes on the weekends and even continuing on the weekdays after school. It's kind of like it's a continuous cycle. You can't really take a break from it if you want to finish it. So I started that program when I was like in around second grade, I think. So yeah, so around the time I finished eighth grade, I still had like some like one third of the book left to memorize and recite from. So the reason, yeah, going to MEA just to help me finish that within, by the time I finished 10th grade, I finished the book. So if I didn't go to MEA, I probably wouldn't have finished by 10th grade, probably still be doing that. So yeah, that's the biggest commitment I had to do going into MEA, and that's probably the flexibility helps a lot with that. But back to your question about just being able to go to a public school, yeah, I think I'd be able to acclimate just like some of my other friends did, but the flexibility was just it wouldn't be an option over there.
Yeah. And I read your essay on that. It's on the ASB website, the
Right, right,
student
yeah.
read. I love that. It was really good. It was amazing. Yeah. That's a lot of time and dedication, and I have profound respect for you.
Thanks.
So, looking at like college and stuff, what's your plan for the future?
Really, it's something that I don't know. To be honest, I don't like talking about it a lot, just because it's so much uncertainty, and like you don't really want to like plan out something for yourself, especially just in high school, because there's a lot of things that can change between now and even just the beginning of your freshman year of college, which is not that far, but still a lot can change at that time. Let alone by the time you get to the middle or end of your college term. So really, I've thought about probably going and hopefully I end up at the dream college that I apply to. But even then, I'm still thinking that whatever path I end up in, hopefully I'll be able to figure something out through then. But
Do you have anything you're planning on majoring in?
right, so for most of the colleges I applied to, I selected my major as electrical engineering or engineering in general. But yeah, to be honest, I'm not really set on any single one path. That's the one I kind of put on my applications to reflect my interest in high school, but like I'm not going to say that I'm 100% set on any path right now.
I think that's a good mentality to have. I think that,
Yeah,
like being open, like having something that you might be planning for and that you're interested in, but then also having other paths that are open. That's really good. Yeah.
yeah.
So have you always wanted to like go into engineering?
I'd say it's something that's been there since like I was in middle school, because middle school is around the time where I was getting into the idea of making things, tinkering with things, creating designs, and especially that's when I started getting into things like science fair projects, then that's kind of where I started made my first engineering projects were with science fair in seventh grade, and I continued that into eighth and high school. So that's kind of where my interest comes from. So yeah, something starting from around that time period.
That's really cool that you've been able to sustain that passion for that long. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather questions? Would you rather go to the past and meet your ancestors or go to the future and meet like your great great grandchildren?
Well, that's a good one. Okay, so on one hand, I'd say if you would go back in time to meet your ancestors, you'd be able to like the amount of wisdom you could get from them. Kind of like they were the people that were gives your family their entire, you know, the entire family bloodline comes from there. Like getting wisdom from them would be something really you want to. That would be just like great. But then at the same time, meeting your descendants, you kind of get to see what your legacy is and what your impact on the world looks like many generations from now. Even if it's such a long time removed from you, you might see like one grain of legacy that you did at your family's time, and that still exists in your family that day. So I lean towards seeing what my great descendants' legacy is than my ancestors' legacy.
I have to agree with you. I think it would be really cool to see like what has lived on. Would you rather have a pause button on life or a rewind button?
I definitely say pause button, because a rewind button, I'm really kind of bad with like what happened happens. That's kind of like my philosophy on life. What happened happens. If you're stuck on the past, you're dwelling in the past, and you want to rewind, you don't know what if you rewind and change what will happen. And I think everything will happen for a reason. So going back and saying I want to rewind and change what happened, and you don't know what the unintended consequences of that will be, and something in your life that might shake out might end up being worse than you even expected will happen. But a pause button would give me the chance to just like, okay, just stop and like kind of if everything in my mind, like life is going like out of just totally disorganized, but like having a pause button would at least give me the chance to get it organized, but at the same time still not mess with the what happened in life already.
I agree. I think having a pause button can definitely give you like a sense of clarity in times of just chaos. And that would be really helpful. What is an experience or event, or it doesn't even have to be an experience or event, it can just be a thing that happened, but what's something that you think really shaped you into who you are today?
Yeah, this is something like I think about a lot. Just like I think sometimes I like to consider myself an introspective person. So like sometimes I just sit and think, okay, here's the way that I think my life is going now. So what's kind of the moment that you could say that started this arc of life, but like kind of like the way that my life ended up here now. What started that event? So what event started that? Honestly, I'd say that that one big formative event. I can't really pin it down to one event. One like moment I kind of think a lot about was when in going back in seventh grade. So in seventh grade, towards the end of the school year, I had a friend. He was my best friend then. He stuck with me a lot from elementary school, like around third grade, and so this is the end of seventh grade, and now he says that he's going to be moving and leaving San Diego and moving somewhere else. So basically, he's my best friend leaving after many years. Kind of like the way that the situation and circumstance he left, it kind of like made me really think about a lot how much I changed from that time in third grade when I was first met him, seventh grade, and that's kind of like I would say that's the moment. Those were like that was the period of years when I kind of like went from being, let's say, shy, reserved, everything, to having him as my best friend. Really opened up my outlook and kind of like made personality or really take on life will have to have now that he's gone. And since then, going to eighth grade and high school, I've mostly kept up the same outlook, making friends, new people, trying to just be open with new experiences and something like that. So I don't know if that's like that had the most impact, but looking back, that's one of the bigger impacts that it had on my life.
I think, yeah. And I think that's a really important time period too when people grow up. And so, like, reflecting on that seems pretty powerful. What's your favorite physical place to be?
I'd say home. Obviously, takes on a different meaning during quarantine and lockdown, but staying at home is always the place where you want to be, whether it's after a long day, it's a bad day you had, or it's a good day, you want to just come back home and unwind and rest and share with people. Home will always be where that's cliche thing goes, home is where the heart is or whatever, and that's definitely be the best physical place. Other than that, outside of home, no, I like being at my local mosque. That's probably the second most favorite place, just because place of worship always has the serenity attached to it, and having a place where you can sit down and contemplate and think. That's always a useful thing. So yeah, I'd probably say a home, and outside of that, the mosque.
Yeah, those are two really, yeah, special places. Um, what's something you're really struggling with right now?
Like I said about the lockdown and quarantine, just like sitting at home, it can be obviously a good thing, and but then at the same time, not being able to see people, that's always going to be the biggest. Really, something that everybody struggles with during quarantine and lockdown. But for me specifically, just it's same with me. Not being able to see people kind of just takes away from how really, if you look back how long it's been since everybody has seen each other. And now we're at the point where like, okay, we might be opening soon, but at the same time, we don't know how we'll be like once we get back. And even when we're back in person, will we really be doing, will we ever be in the same way as we were before? Just the uncertainty and everything that kind of piles up, even though I wouldn't say that I'm really having a lot of depression or anxiety over it. It's kind of still something that sticks on my mind, just thinking about it from time to time.
I know, and looking back now, it's almost been a year, which is
Yeah.
absolutely crazy.
Mm.
And,
And one thing is, no, yeah, go ahead.
you go ahead.
I was going to say, especially one thing I think about a lot in the recent days, just like I'm always trying to visually map out the last like week or 2 weeks leading up to the big announcement time that school will be closed. We don't know how long. So leading up to that point, I keep on thinking back up what were my last memories and last really events in school that I experienced, because those pretty much would have been like that's pretty much the end of my high school experience. I know we're hopefully planning to have opening up for at least graduation or at least the end of the school, but basically that was when my high school experience ended. So it's really something I like to do a lot, just look back at those 2 weeks before school was suspended.
Yeah, you're right. It's really interesting to reflect on those times. I haven't really done that, but yeah, that makes me want to now. And I don't think I carry with it the same weight that you do because you're a senior. You were a junior last year, and you're a senior now. So those really were your last high school experiences. Yeah, that's pretty powerful. What is something that you think the world is really struggling with right now?
I'd say probably in the whole world, it's that people just they're too polarized. So we always, especially obviously, we know what's going on in politics and conflicts and partisan divisions, and also just from violent conflict to some parts of the world to just even in other parts of the world, just not being able to address any sorts of issues of partisan division or really anger towards each other. I think the biggest problem that at the core of all of these struggles is that I wouldn't just say that people don't listen to each other, but like people are looking at the worst of each other. People aren't really trying to solve problems in like a pragmatic way. They're really, it's like, I'd say, I'm thinking the word compromise, but a better word than that would just be like, what's better for everybody, okay? People are not looking for the interest of everybody, they're looking for their self-interest. And really, that's probably just the core of, you could say, the vast majority of issues that we see in the news today. Just negativity that underlies all of that, I say.
You worded that so well. That was really amazing. What's something that brings you the most joy?
I'd say most joy would be just being with being with my family. Really, it's been the most joy. Kind of, you like I said about uncertain future and everything. So really, you want to always live in the moment, and at the moment, it's really most of the time it's with my family. So I've learned being at home the whole time. I've learned to kind of make the most, and then kind of see the positive outlook of everything I do and spend time with my family. You'd say kind of this is a change from before quarantine, where I'd be going from here to school, other places outside of school, outside of the house. You kind of that time you spend less with the family, you kind of don't have the same level of appreciation or like kind of introspection that you would be spending all the time with your family. Yeah, I'd say that probably gives me the most joy outside. Most joy overall.
That's another really good mentality to have, an approach to family. I feel like I've spent so much of quarantine, like by myself, but I've also been able to appreciate more like spending time with my family,
Yeah.
and so that's important. Yeah. What's your greatest strength in life?
I think my greatest strength in life would be just, earlier I mentioned the point about introspection. I just say the thing about sometimes the way I pay attention to detail, like I don't say it's more of a strength, but more of like a not even a strength or a skill, kind of like a trait that I have. The way I pay attention to detail in some areas, just or even just beyond the detail, just like the way I think about something, it's just like think deep and introspection kind of gives me that second line of gives me like an extra perspective that other people might not have in certain discussions or situations. But the way that I look at things kind of will sometimes add an extra perspective, and that kind of makes the discussions or like the activities I'm involved in more like interesting, just because I kind of like add a new dimension that others may not have thought of.
The way you talk about it, you seem so like well versed in being so philosophical. I feel like I struggle with having like a very like structured like regular life side, and also a very philosophical side that likes to is very introspective. And I find it difficult to kind of bring those two together. But it seems like you've done a great job of that.
Yeah, to be honest, I probably do lean more on that like, not really philosophical, but just like introspective side.
Mm-hmm.
Then sometimes I will end up neglecting like the actual parts of life that will need to be organized, and that's why it's like the thing about pause button in life. You want to have that thing where you will be able to reorganize everything, because if you spend too much time on like deep thought and introspection, yeah, that can be a good thing, but also the actual parts of your life that you need to maintain on a day-to-day basis, your actual relationships with people, your work, and your other commitments, that will sometimes fall into disarray. So keeping a balance with that is something I've struggled with at times. It's gotten better over time. I'm still trying to find a way to strike the right balance, but yeah, that's a good point you mentioned about balancing those two parts of life.
Well, I feel like then that's something great because I feel like some people don't even realize that you need to have a balance between those two things. They're just so focused
Yeah.
on one of them. So we're already ahead. Um, on a weekend or like a week, maybe that's not turn in week, what would you be doing in your free time? Just like something fun.
Well, let's see. So I classify the activities I do in my free time into two categories. There's like one class of activities that I'll try to do on a consistent basis. Like, for example, I'd say the getting exercise, especially hopefully after quarantine, or playing basketball again, or just really doing any kind of recreational activities such as going hiking, or yeah, things like that. Those are what I consider like activities that I want to keep in my schedule on a regular basis. Whenever I have free time on a regular basis, like on a weekend where I have no work or something, those are the activities I want to do during that time. Then there's like the class of activities that I would do if I had like literally zero commitments at all, and like I had like a totally free and open schedule. I had like no concern to look at even within the next week or the next 2 weeks. And these are the activities that I'd like to just like go free for all activities. And that'd be like, let's say I have a huge reading list of books I want to read. So if I had the choice, I'd like order every single one of those books and like just lock myself up in my room and spend time reading those books. And beyond that, things like gardening. I love gardening in my backyard. So obviously that's something you want to keep in my schedule on a regular basis. But if I had like a totally free and open schedule, I just like spend time creating the beautiful dream garden of every single literally vegetable and flower and tree I can think of. Um, yeah, and just like other than that, fun things I do, like I said, on a regular basis, whether it's like I said, playing basketball, watching sports in general, playing games, talking to my friends, literally talking about the most random things. That would just be such a joy to have. Just like imagine just getting your mind off work entirely and like talking about the silliest random things can really be a just fun experience that keeps your mind off other things that are stressful.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all wonderful things. I'm definitely more of an indoor plant person. Like I have a bunch of indoor plants that I tend to rather than an outside garden. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
a lot of fun.
I'm not an outdoors person, but I'd say that being indoors has turned me into an outdoor person.
Oh yeah,
Being indoors for so
definitely.
long, yes,
Me too.
absolutely.
Do you have any favorite books?
Um, the one book I always like try to bring up in these discussions is the autobiography of Malcolm X. Actually, I think Aaron might have also mentioned that in his last Humans of MEA interview. That's like the one nonfiction book from high school that I always remember reading, just because it's such a moving memoir and just an incredible story that speaks to a lot of the issues of racial polarization that we see today. Beyond that, I've been looking into a lot of different books regarding like politics, philosophy, theology, those issues in general. Those are the types of books that I have on my reading list and I'm looking forward to reading.
Yeah, I have a huge reading list too. I have like my Barnes and Noble cart is just completely filled with tons of books that I hope to buy soon.
Especially, it's really annoying when you can't find them in the library, and you're just like, okay, it's either the option is ordering it or hopefully finding a PDF of it online if it's legal. It's not legal.
If you could swap lives with anyone, it could be like a celebrity, it could be an animal, what would you choose? What would you swap lives with?
Now, I probably will choose to swap a life with an animal just because I can't really see myself in the shoes of another person. Like, really, the experiences that I have are just so unique to myself, and all the experiences that I've ever had, if you add them together, good or bad, I wouldn't really exchange with another person. Now, as for an animal, what animal would I switch with? I'd probably switch life with a penguin just because, penguins are the only ones that will be able to live in somewhere like Antarctica. So, that's such a unique experience for an animal that if there was one animal that I had to choose, it'd be the one with the most unique experience. That would be a penguin living in Antarctica.
Yeah, that's really interesting. 'Cause I heard to go to Antarctica, you have to have your appendix removed, right? Something like that. So if you were a penguin, you wouldn't have to get that done.
I've actually never heard of that.
Yeah, because apparently if there's not enough hospitals.
You could technically consider them a species there.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. Actually, I've never heard of that factoid before.
I could be completely wrong. It could be like a lie. One of my friends told me, but apparently there's not enough hospitals there to treat appendicitis quickly enough. So before you go to Antarctica, you have to get your appendix removed. In 50 years, what is something that you think you'll be really proud of about now?
I think probably it would be the same thing I mentioned earlier about completing memorization of the Quran. Because kind of like in Islamic culture, that's the thing that stays with you your entire life. And I don't know what even the world will look like 50 years from now. What value will we place on things? Will we place the same value on things we do now as we do then? But I know for sure that that's one thing I will value in 50 years because that's the thing that's something that's for centuries that's always been a cultural something that's always been valued in our culture, and I know for sure in 50 years it will still be valued, and I will value it for sure in 50 years.
Yeah, that's definitely something to be proud of, yeah. Do you have any favorite movies or music?
As far as favorite movies go, I'd say like my favorite. Oh, this is actually a tough one because it's been a while since I watched a really good movie. Obviously, there's a lot of movies coming out recently, but I have to dig back to find a good movie that I watched and really stuck with me. One I really always liked was Toy Stories. Obviously, that's something that everybody watches as a kid. The entire Toy Stories franchise is something that really sticks with you always. It's iconic for a lot of reasons. Probably don't need to go into too much detail about that. As far as movies that I watched recently, say Endgame was probably the one. That was the last one I watched in theaters. That's something that always will stick with you too, just because the entire storyline of it will be. People will talk about it for years to come, and obviously it's the highest grossing movie of all time and whatnot. And really, I wouldn't say that the movies that I've watched, they don't really have, you'd say, the so-called deep themes that other movies, that other iconic movies that people have watched over the last few years. I don't really haven't watched much of those movies. I do hope to start going to watch more movies, especially when the theaters reopen and become safe again. There's already two movie releases I'm looking forward to coming up. But yeah, those are the movies that I would say I remember from my childhood and Endgame from the last few years. As far as music goes, the interesting thing about music is that a lot of people are surprised when they see I'm not that much of a music person. Really, I don't know why. I've never been the kind of person who just in his free time who just start playing a Spotify playlist and just like lying down and listening to it. I've never been that kind of person. I think the reason for that is that, like, I think the way a lot of people get into music is that they listen to it kind of like in the background while they're doing work or something. But like the way I do work, or the way I like just spend my free time, I have my attention directed entirely towards like reading or like just thinking in the background. So kind of like I wouldn't say I don't really listen to music really in my free time, because I've never really had much of a favorite artist or album that I'm really gonna say that I into. Um, but yeah, that's kind of like something I'd say that it's pretty unique about me compared to most of the people who listen to music a lot. I've never been that kind of person, but I know it's not something for it's some most people will disagree with me. I know that for sure, but yeah, that's something about my music interest.
Actually, I think that's quite a strength because I feel like our brains, especially our generation, have gotten so used to be like being stimulated all the time, 24/7. And so I find it comforting to have like noise in the background going on. But that's again, I think it's a strength that you don't have to have that because it just shows how much dedication, how much focus you can put on like one specific thing.
Yeah.
As far as movies, Endgame, now that you bring it up, I think that was also the last movie that I saw in theaters. I remember being really, really excited for it, and definitely now I want to watch it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the last one I watched in theaters, and the one before that I watched was Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and obviously that wasn't. I don't think that was really a great movie, and I would have put that on my top list. But so obviously the ones you watch in theaters end up being hit or miss, and if I don't go often, the ones will either be tend to be good or bad.
Yeah, I definitely for me it was I grew up seeing the Star Wars movies and the Marvel movies. Like those were pretty much the only ones that I would go to like opening night of see in theaters. So yeah, but definitely hit or miss with some of those. I think I'm done with all the questions. So is there anything else that you would like to talk about or bring up?
No, I think we covered probably pretty much a bunch of the points I was thinking of coming into this conversation. We talk about yeah, MEA, my experience with MEA, just in my interest in general. I did want to like kind of give a few of my thoughts about more of my experience at MEA, because obviously I'm going to be graduating, and just I want to give some more reflections on my time here. So I'd say like we talked about the strengths of MEA, how the flexibility and really the welcoming community. Um, I'd say it's not really like a weakness of MEA, more like a kind of like a result of the way it just set up. Really, one thing I noticed about it is that a lot of the kind of social circles at MEA are kind of like they end up being a really insular, if you know what I mean. I don't mean this as a really a in a negative sense, really. It's more like a result of okay, so you're in a classroom with we're in a class like a maximum like 35 people, other people in your class. So as a natural result of that, you will have people they're in every class with each other. They see each other all the time on campus, off campus. That kind of like results in circles of people within class becoming tighter. But then as a result of that, like kind of an unintended result of that, they become really too insular and like kind of it might be difficult for like someone who's new to get involved in those circles. So that's kind of a thing, the challenge that I faced when I first came to MEA in ninth grade. And like, you know, some people, they already know each other for some time. Other people, they were involved on campus more often, or they were on campus in non-class periods, whereas at that time, I'd really just leave campus after class. So that's kind of the trade-off of being at MEA. Yeah, you'll be in a closer, more welcoming community, but at the same time, that community might not be harder to get into just because it's already set up that way from before. But I'd say that I overcame that challenge of the closed MEA community, probably going into my later ninth grade, 10th grade, and really that's when I started becoming more involved on campus. I was hanging out on campus a lot off class periods and just started to get into activities outside of class, and that's kind of the way I broke into those insular circles that you call it. Now, obviously, the way it's online, it kind of just like changes the dynamic of all of that. But I'd say that that's one thing I think about from MEA. Like I said, I don't really view it as a negative. It's more like an unintended result. But that's one of the reflections that I've had from years at MEA. Probably like I said about going to a public school, I'd be able to acclimate. In a public school, I'd probably just find my own circle of friends and kind of just like be tied to that circle of friends and just not really go expand my friend circle beyond that. That's knowing the way that I am, that probably I would be like that if I went to public high school. So yeah, MEA kind of just changes your outlook on that, I'd say. Beyond that, yeah, really, I wouldn't trade my experience at MEA for another school just because it's so unique, and it will be on my mind even as I go into college. Like, this is my high school experience. It's going to shape the way my approach to I take to my college years. So yeah, like I said, I wouldn't trade off my MEA experience or experience at another school. It's just really unique in that way.
Yeah. And you make a good point because I hadn't thought about that before, but just like how tight and close the circles were. And we always have like a bunch of new kids every year. And so I guess I never experienced that because I kind of moved to MEA with a group of my friends from another school. But now that you pointed out, it's definitely something I've noticed of like there's the kids who all know each other, and then there's the other ones who are a little bit more like outsiders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, that's not something that people do out of being
Yeah.
mean or something because it's welcome, but it's just the natural result of the way it's set up.
Do you have your sights set on any specific place for college?
Not yet. I mean, this is March, so the acceptance
Yeah.
will be rolling in this month, so I can't really make a decision on the future. Probably like the biggest chance will be I end up at a UC school, and that's really I'm really comfortable with that because I like staying in California, wherever it is in California, and especially San Diego. If I end up staying in San Diego, that would also be a really good option. But really, the West Coast is where I want to stay for college, but I can't make a decision on that yet because the acceptances haven't come yet.
And we have a bunch of good colleges in California, so yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I
Um,
know this is different from a lot of other students who want to go out of state. I'm not really that kind of person who wants to go far away from where I grew up.
is there anything else that you would like to talk about?
No, I don't really have any things I had on my mind other than that. I just want to say, yeah, it's a great conversation we had. Really, really, kind of like an opening up session. Really, just all the thoughts that I had going here, I let them out here. Pretty much, I covered all the bases I wanted to. I don't know if you had any other like thoughts or like random ideas that came to your mind you want to ask me about. You're also free to do that because I'm good with making it a little bit open ended. Or
I don't know. I guess maybe like what is something that you're really looking forward to or something that you're really excited about in the near future? And on a positive note.
really just having at least some semblance of a proper graduation. At least they'll probably make up for as much as they can in the past year. They're really anything that comes close to an in-person graduation or a no traditional graduation, and I can actually have memories from that. That would be really good. Beyond that, I'm glad the outlook on the summer looks really positive from a health and COVID standpoint. So any plans I have for the summer, I want to make the most out of them, whether it's in person or even if something that's online. Like some of the programs will still be online, but even then, whatever I can participate in the summer, I want to make the most of that, especially since everything from last summer was pretty much canceled.
Well, that's a great note to end on, but I know you're not much of a music person, but at the end of every episode, we're asking for one song to play when the credits roll. So you can choose a song, or you could choose like a music piece if you want, or you can pass.
I'll go with